My parents mocked me for wanting to be a musician, so I sold out stadiums while they sat in the same house. They forced me from. I'm a 27-year-old guy. And in my family, being different was basically a crime. My dad's the kind of man who thinks calloused hands are a badge of honor. He built homes from the ground up, sweat, lumber, dirt under his nails. My mom worked 12-hour shifts as a nurse, never complained, and always had dinner on the table by 6. Respectable, hardworking, no-nonsense people, the kind who measure success by pay stubs and pension plans. And then there was me. I wasn't loud. I wasn't athletic. I wasn't the kid who brought home trophies or straight A's. I was the quiet one, the one always humming, always tapping rhythms on the table. I'd spend hours with headphones on, not to block the world out, but to build a new one in my head, one where every sound had a soul. When I was 14, I mustered the courage to show my mom a track I made on this free music software. I was so proud, my hands were literally shaking as I handed her the headphones. She listened for maybe 20 seconds before laughing. "Cute," she said, handing them back. "But that won't feed you." That sentence stayed with me longer than any melody ever could. At the dinner table, my older brother bragged about getting into varsity football. My sister talked about med school. My parents beamed. When I mentioned I wanted to save for a better keyboard, my dad didn't even look up from his plate. Maybe try saving for a real future. Instead, he muttered, "I learned early that love in our house came with conditions, and dreams didn't make the cut, but I kept dreaming anyway, even when it felt like no one else heard the music but me." Bought my first keyboard with lawn mowing money, $40. Half the keys stuck if you pressed too hard, and the speakers crackled like static, but I didn't care. To me, it was sacred. Every time I plugged it in and pressed a key, it felt like rebellion, like I was carving out space in a world that didn't want me to exist as I was, of course. The moment my dad heard me playing through the thin bedroom walls, he banged on them hard enough to rattle my posters. "This ain't a damn concert hall," he yelled. I didn't even flinch anymore. They never heard the music, not the way I did. To them, it was noise, a distraction, a waste of time. When I asked for lessons, my mom looked at me like I'd just asked her to buy me a Ferrari. Do I look like I have piano lesson money? What next? A gold-plated mic. Be serious. So I got serious, just not in the way they meant. I downloaded free tutorials. I stayed up past midnight practicing scales with headphones in, fingers aching from repetition. I studied YouTube videos the way my brother studied football plays. Music theory, chord progressions, vocal mixing. I inhaled it all like oxygen. I started sneaking out on weekends to play wherever I could. Open mic nights, parks, dive bars, that didn't care I was 17 as long as I sounded good and didn't cause trouble. Those nights were the only times I felt real. One night, a drunk guy put his arm around me and slurred, "You're gonna be big one day." Kid, he was the first person who ever said that to me. I should have recorded it, played it for my dad, just to hear him scoff. But part of me already knew. He wouldn't have believed it anyway. I knew I was pushing my luck, sneaking out every weekend. But I was careful at least. I thought I was. I used to come home before midnight, slip in through the garage, and tuck my keyboard under the bed. I even changed clothes in the driveway once to avoid smelling like cigarettes and beer. But it all came crashing down over a Facebook video. Someone had tagged me in a clip from Open Mic Night, Shaky Phone. Recording of me playing a stripped-down version of a song I wrote. It barely had 300 views, but one of them was my uncle, and he showed it to my dad. The next morning, I came downstairs to the sound of silence, no coffee brewing. Just my parents sitting at the kitchen table like they were waiting for a criminal to confess. My dad held his phone up. "You think this is funny? Embarrassing the family? Making a clown of yourself in some bar?" I tried to explain. I said it wasn't like that people liked my music. That I wasn't out doing drugs or stealing. I was just playing piano, but he wasn't listening. He never did. He just said, "Either you quit this noise, or you find somewhere else to live." My mom didn't speak at all. She just looked at her folded hands like they might start praying for her. I thought they were bluffing. I really did, so I said, "Then I guess I'll go." That night, I stuffed a backpack with 2 changes of clothes, my keyboard, and my old pair of headphones. No one stopped me. No one said they'd miss me. The door didn't slam behind me, but It still sounded like it did for the first few nights. I stayed with my friend Devin. His parents let me crash on their lumpy basement couch with a thin blanket and the sound of the washing machine kicking on every few hours. I told them it was just for a little while, but deep down, I knew I had no backup plan. I didn't have much. $43, a cracked phone, and a keyboard that barely fit in my duffel. My whole life packed in 3 items. I kept telling myself it was temporary. I just needed a chance, one person to hear me play, one open door. But weeks passed, and I stayed on that couch way too long. Eventually, Devin's mom started leaving passive-aggressive notes on the fridge. Don't forget to help with groceries. Guests should contribute to... I got the hint. I started busking downtown outside a subway station with decent foot traffic. First day, I made $11.83. Not much, but enough for a sandwich and bus fare. Sometimes people dropped coins. Sometimes they asked me to shut up. But once in a while, someone would stop and really listen. One afternoon, a little girl tugged on her mom's hand and said, "He sounds like the movies." Her mom dropped a 20 in my jar. That single moment kept me going for another week. I recorded some of my sets on a borrowed laptop from Devin's cousin. Grainy videos, messy audio, but I uploaded them anyway. Somewhere in my chest, hope still flickered. My parents hadn't texted. Not even once. I checked my phone every night before sleeping, just in case. But silence became its own kind of answer. I was about 2 months into living like a ghost when I got the email. Subject line, "Your sound is something special." At first I thought it was spam, but I opened it anyway because when you're broke and cold and tired, you read everything. It was from a guy named Marcus who ran a tiny indie label out of Portland. He said he'd seen one of my Subway performance videos online, and something about the way I played stuck with him. He wanted to talk. I didn't even believe it was real until we got on a video call and he showed me his studios. Cluttered, but real. I swear, I almost cried seeing a room full of actual equipment and someone who thought I wasn't a joke. Marcus offered to help me produce a 5-track EP. No strings, no promises, just studio time and support. I slept in a Greyhound seat for 14 hours to get there. The studio wasn't glamorous. The soundproofing was foam nailed into drywall, and the mic stand leaned like it had arthritis. But for the first time, I felt like I was somewhere I belonged. I poured everything into those tracks. My pain, my rejection, my rage, my hope. We put the EP on SoundCloud, Spotify, Bandcamp, everywhere. I didn't expect much. Then one of the tracks, Quiet Kid Anthem, started getting picked up. First, 100 plays. Then 1,000. Then a TikTok influencer used it in a background for a breakup video, and it exploded. Suddenly, people were tagging me, asking, "Who is this guy?" I went from sleeping on couches to streaming 100K plays in a week. My parents still hadn't called, but strangers were singing. Lyrics I wrote in basements for the first time. I didn't feel like a mistake. I felt like an artist. It was weird how the whispers found their way back to me. A girl I barely knew from high school dimmed me out of the blue. "Hey, sorry if this is weird, but your mom told my aunt you were homeless and doing drugs. Just wanted to check if you're okay." I stared at the message for a long time. My heart didn't race. My blood didn't boil. It just sank. Apparently, my parents had turned my absence into a cautionary tale. They told extended family I'd run off to be a starving artist and refused to come home, as if they'd begged me to stay. As if I hadn't been kicked out like trash left on the curb, they left out the part where they gave me a choice between abandoning my passion or being abandoned. It wasn't just family, either. A few old neighbors reached out. "We're praying for you. Hope you find your way." Some even sent links to job fairs. Like I was lost. Like I was broken. Meanwhile, Quiet Kid Anthem had crossed 500,000 plays. I was booking my first small tour, 5 cities. Low pay, tiny venues. But it was mine. Every stage, every crowd. Every spotlight felt like I was reclaiming something they tried to bury. I started recording everything. Behind-the-scenes footage, van rides, awkward sound checks. I wanted people to see what it really looked like rising without support, without comfort, without safety nets. And fans started to show up not just online, but in real life. Kids with headphones. Moms who said my song helped their son speak again after depression. People who felt what I felt, but still, not a single word from home, not even a fake apology. They weren't proud of me. They were ashamed I didn't stay invisible. I was in the back of a busted rental van when my phone nearly exploded with notifications. At first, I thought someone had died or that I was being canceled. But it wasn't that. It was something else entirely. One of my songs, Flesh and Frequency, got picked up by a major artist. A rapper with millions of followers used the melody as a sample in his latest single. No warning, no heads up, just boom, there it was on Spotify. In a collab with a Grammy-nominated producer. My tag was still on the track, and people noticed. By that afternoon, my follower count doubled. By the next morning, my DMIs were flooded with journalists, fans, and label reps asking, "Who is this kid?" I called Marcus, breathless. "Is this real?" I asked him. He laughed so hard, I thought he was choking. "Not only is it real," he said, "we just got offered a publishing deal." It was like the universe flipped a switch. I wasn't invisible anymore. And then, like clockwork, I got a text from my mom. First one in over a year. "Your cousin showed me the song. Congrats. Hope you're staying grounded." Not "I'm proud of you." Not "I'm sorry, just careful wording," like she was trying not to admit I was ever right. I didn't reply, not because I was bitter, but because that message wasn't about MIT, was about them. About pretending they were always in my corner when the lights finally came on. They weren't. And I knew now I didn't need them to be. That song, that moment, changed everything. Not just for my career, but for my spirit. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was seen. I wasn't even in the family group chat anymore. I got kicked out years ago after calling out my dad for mocking me during Christmas dinner. But suddenly, my phone buzzed with screenshots from cousins I hadn't heard from in ages. Messages like, "Isn't this our nephew? Did you see him on YouTube? Didn't he used to live with you guys?" Apparently, now I was worth talking about. My cousin Laura sent me a screenshot of my dad's response in the group. "We always knew he had talent, just needed time to grow up." That sentence made me want to punch a wall. The same man who once told me I was wasting my life on noise was now acting like he'd been my #1 fan. Then came the flood. My aunt started commenting on my Instagram posts with prayer hands and hearts. An uncle I hadn't seen since I was 12 deemed me, saying I was an inspiration. One of my siblings, my older brother, who once said, "You're not a real man if you don't work with your hands," texted me, "Crazy ride, huh? Proud of you, lil bro." I didn't respond. Not to any of them, because none of them were there when I was sleeping in a van parked behind a gas station in Tulsa. None of them were there when I had to beg for leftover catering scraps after a show. And none of them asked if I was okay when my own parents kicked me out like I was disposable. But now that the world had noticed me, they remembered my name, and the only thing louder than their silence back then was their fake applause now. The first time I stepped onto an arena stage, I couldn't breathe. 15,000 people, lights flashing, screens 10 feet tall with my face on them. My stage name lit up in neon across the back wall, Novica name I chose, so my real one wouldn't haunt me. But somehow, standing there, all I could think about was the kid I used to be. The one playing cracked keys in a basement. Hoping anyone would listen, the crowd chanted, screamed, sang every word of Quiet Kid, anthem like it was gospel. And then came the part, the bridge, where I always changed the lyrics depending on the city. But that night, I kept the line raw and honest. Kicked out by blood, raised by strangers, found my voice in broken stages. The room went silent after I sang it. Then it erupted. People cried. Strangers hugged. I saw a girl holding a sign that said, "You made being different feel brave." Backstage, I collapsed in a chair, soaked in sweat, tears slipping down my face before I could stop them. My manager patted my shoulder and said, "You're not just big, you're important." That night, I got an idea. I told my team to book a tour, full US run. But I had one specific request. First show has to be in my hometown. They asked if I wanted to skip it. Worried it'd be too raw. But no, I didn't want to skip it. I wanted them to hear every note. They once called a waste of time echo through the arena they still lived near. I wanted them to sit in the same town they threw me out of, and feel what it's like to be forgotten by the kid who finally made them impossible to forget. The envelope was thick, matte black, and sealed with a silver foil stamp of my tour logo. No letter, no note. Just 2 front-row tickets and a parking pass for the arena in our hometown. I didn't text. I didn't call. I just mailed it to my parents' house, the same one they forced me out of when I was 17. I wasn't sure if they'd come. I told myself I didn't care. But part of me did, the night of the show. I peeked through the backstage curtain just before going on. There they were. My mom in a blouse she probably ironed twice. My dad with his arms crossed, face unreadable. My sister was beside them, swiping through her phone like the lights and energy around her didn't even register. I didn't acknowledge them, not during the show, not after I gave the performance of my life, every chord, every lyric, every beat saturated in everything they said. I'd never be dot. At one point, during Flesh and Frequency, I caught my mom wiping her eye. My dad stayed stone still, but he clapped. Not for me more, like for the idea of me, the version he could now brag about at barbecues. After the final song, I bowed. The lights dimmed. The crowd roared. I walked off stage, straight past the hall where VIPs waited to meet me. I glanced down the corridor where they stood, my parents, not moving, just watching. I didn't wave, I didn't smile. I just kept walking, because I didn't need them to say they were proud. I didn't need them to explain, or apologize, or beg. Their silence in that moment felt exactly like the night they made me leave. Only now, I was the one choosing to walk away. It was supposed to be a small podcast, a sit-down with a local host during the final leg of the tour. Nothing fancy, just a folding chair setup, 2 mics, and an old couch with a tear in the armrest. I agreed because the guy had been one of the first to ever play my song on air. Long before anyone cared who I was, he asked the usual questions. How'd you get your start? Who were your influences? What's the story behind Quiet Kid Anthem? But then he leaned in and said, if you could say one thing to the people who didn't believe in you, what would it be? I paused, not for drama, but because the lump in my throat hit harder than I expected. Then I said it. Word for word, my parents mocked me for wanting to be a musician, kicked me out, told people I was homeless and strung out, and now they sit in the same house they forced me from. While I sell out stadiums named after banks they probably owe money to. The host stared at me, then whispered, "That's gonna hit hard." He wasn't wrong. That clip blew up within 48 hours. Shared, stitched, quoted, memmed, turned into background audio for thousands of videos of people chasing their own dreams. Hash from basements to billboards started trending. I became more than a musician, I became a symbol. That night, I checked my phone before bed. 2 new messages. One from my mom, "That interview hurt us deeply. Why would you say that publicly?" And one from my dad, "You should have handled this like a man." I didn't reply to either because I finally understood. They weren't mad that I said it. They were mad that everyone else finally believed it too. After that interview went viral. Everyone saw the highlight reels, sold-out shows, emotional lyrics. The kid who made it, despite it all, but what no one knew, what I never talked about, was the night. I almost gave it all up. It was about a year before the EP dropped. I was living out of my car behind a 24-hour gym. I'd signed up for a free trial just so I could use the showers. My phone bill was overdue. My stomach was eating itself. And the city was in one of those freezing stretches where the air felt like broken glass. I remember sitting in the front seat of that car, staring at my keyboard in the back seat like it was mocking me, like it was the reason I was here, and I said out loud, maybe they were right. I meant it. I grabbed the keyboard and walked 3 blocks to a pawn shop with a flickering neon sign. My hands were numb. My heart was quieter than it had ever been. The guy behind the counter said he'd give me $60 for it. I nodded, reached to hand it over, and then I heard it. A little kid, maybe 8, was standing near the window watching me. I hadn't even noticed him. He looked at me and said, "Mister, were you the one playing piano outside the market last week?" I hesitated. "Yeah," he smiled, wide and honest. That made my mom stop crying. I stood there, frozen, my fingers curled around the keyboard again. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked out that night. I played Flesh and Frequency for the first time in a parking lot under a broken STREETLIGHT. No one clapped. No one cheered, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe I still mattered. A few weeks after the interview blew up, I got an email from my mom. The subject line was just, "Talk." The body of the message was short, almost sterile. "We'd like to see you. Just us. No cameras. No social media. Please don't bring press into this." It didn't say, "We miss you." It didn't say, "We're sorry," just conditions. I stared at it for a long time before I replied. I agreed, but only on neutral ground. A small cafe downtown. No media, no entourage. Just me, a hoodie, and a pair of sunglasses I didn't really need. They were already seated when I walked in. My mom stood and tried to hug me, awkwardly, like hugging a statue. My dad didn't even stand, just nodded like he was meeting a client. We ordered coffee. It was quiet, too quiet. Then the guilt parade began. "We were scared for you," my mom said. "We didn't want you to throw your life away," my dad added. I asked one question. Just one. "Do you regret kicking me out?" My dad looked down at his cup. My mom inhaled deeply. Then she said, "We didn't know it would turn out like this. Not we regret it. Not we were wrong. Just this." I sipped my coffee and said nothing, because what they wanted wasn't connection. It was redemption without accountability. They wanted to be able to say, "We made mistakes, but look how great he turned out." As if they were part of the journey instead of the reason I had to walk it alone, I stood up, left the money for their drinks, and said, "Thanks for meeting. I hope you find peace." And I walked out before they could say another word. Some doors don't slam. Some just close quietly, completely, and for good. I knew my next album would be different, not because of the budget or the collabs or the upgraded studio, but because, for the first time, I wasn't writing to escape my past, I was writing through it. Track 3 was called Front Porch Ghosts. It wasn't subtle. It was about a boy who was kicked out of his home for dreaming, who learned to sing louder than the voices telling him to shut up. Every lyric was deliberate. Every line dripped with the silence, shame, and gaslighting I had buried for years. I didn't name anyone. I didn't have to. They knew, my fans knew, too. I started getting messages like, "This track made me call my dad, just to say I won't be quiet anymore. I cried in the car. It's like you lived my life." Critics called it haunting, brilliant, and an anthem for the unheard. My label wanted to push it as a lead single. I said yes. When the music video dropped, it opened on a house that looked a lot like the one I grew up in. A boy drags his keyboard down the driveway in the cold, while voices yell from inside. It wasn't a reenactment, it was an exorcism. And then, a few days later, I got a text from my mom. "We listened. It hurt, but we understand now. We really do. We're proud, even if it's hard to hear." I didn't reply, not out of anger, but because that message wasn't for me. It was them finally realizing they weren't. Written into my story as heroes, they were the ghosts on the porch, and I had already walked past them the day I signed the papers for my house. It didn't feel like victory, it felt like stillness, the kind I had never known growing up in a house where walking on eggshells was normal and dreaming was a threat. It was everything I imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows, warm hardwood floors that echoed when I sang, a backyard that backed up to nothing but trees and silence. And in the center of it all, under a skylight I'd had custom installed, was my dream piano, glossy, grand, black as night. I sat there that first night, no entourage, no noise, just me and the keys. I played Quiet Kid Anthem again, slowly this time, letting it fill the house. It sounded different in there, fuller, like it had finally reached the place it was always meant to be. I didn't throw a party. I didn't post about it. I just lived in it. Quietly, freely, completely. People ask me if I've forgiven my parents. I don't know if that's the right word. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not trying to prove anything. I don't need an apology or a relationship. I don't even need them to listen, because I'm no longer playing for them. I'm playing for the kid who almost gave up in a pawn shop. For the kid who shook while holding headphones up to a mother who laughed. For every person who was told their dream was cute but useless. I live alone, but I am not lonely. My house isn't full of people. It's full of peace, and I would take that over a full dinner table of silent judgment any day. If you've ever been told to be realistic, while your heart begged to be Bold, this is for you. If they laughed at your sketchbook, your notebook, your garage band, your startup, your voice, your silence, your vision, this is for you. They said I was wasting time, that music was a phase, that I'd come crawling back when life got hard. But when life did get hard, music was the only thing that didn't leave me. And when I got better, when I healed, grew, climbed, those same voices tried to rewrite the past. They called themselves my foundation. They weren't. They were the wreckage I had to climb out of. Here's the truth. You don't need permission to believe in yourself. You don't need a cheerleader to chase something only you can see. Not everyone will get it. Some people will resent you just for dreaming out loud. But the beauty of chasing a dream is this: it teaches you who's really in your corner. Sometimes it's not your parents. Sometimes it's not your siblings. Sometimes it's a stranger on a subway bench who drops $1 in your jar and whispers, "Don't stop." I used to think revenge would taste like sold-out arenas, but now I know peace tastes better. Peace is making music in a house I own. Peace is knowing I'm not who they said I'd become. Peace is no longer needing their approval to feel whole. So if you're out there, still in your garage or basement or notebook, keep going. Let them laugh, because one day, when you've turned that waste of time into a life that sings, they'll sit in the same silence they once forced on you, and they'll finally understand the one thing they never did. Dreams don't need permission, they just need courage.